So, today's guest on the Keen on Yoga podcast is Tara Mitra. I always felt like I was a doer, a hard worker, high achiever, until I met Tara. Born in Toronto, her Canadian mother married a father of Indian origin who'd come over as a student and found himself in the role of a local guru in the area. So it was her grandmother who started visiting her father as a guru and took her mother along one day. And when her mother asked of him what she should do with her life, he replied, "Marry me." So that's what happened. And Tara was born. However, the marriage didn't last long, and Tara grew up from 2 years of age in a household defined by the rigid tyranny of her stepfather, which found her moving leaving home at 15, and then subsequently searching high and low for not only for work, but for a solution to the trauma that her upbringing had left her. After trying many things, she found her way into a yoga class, and however, by this time she had worked her way up into management roles in the food and beverage industry, particularly qualifying as a sommelier, and she was now training sommeliers. So she was in a really, really good position that she'd worked up into. So fast forward a few years, and Tara, in the end, through the yoga, finds herself in Mysore, India, practicing ashtanga yoga, where with a click of a button, famously, she sells her wine cellar, one that she's collected over the years, sourcing wine for different people from all over the world. And she sells it from her bed in Mysore to finance her study in Mysore for the next few years, I think. And this allows her to live, and she studies with Saraswati and then meets her partner now, Rob, and they're married. And they've started a yoga, they're planning to start a yoga center in southern Italy. But before that point, they had a yoga and therapy center in Mysore, India, which they spent 2 years running. So Tara became a senior student and a close relationship with Saraswati, as well as meeting Rob and running this center. Tara now lives in southern Italy, as I mentioned, and teaches an individualized form of yoga therapy online, as well as chanting and Ayurveda, all of which she is thoroughly trained in. Utterly passionate about study, Tara is now completing a training for the use of yoga with PSD survivors. As aforementioned, with her partner Rob, they plan to open the Centre for Wellbeing in southern Italy near Mount Etna. And if you want to see Rob, then I've done a recent interview on YouTube with Rob as well. So anyway, welcome Tara to the Keen on Yoga podcast. So welcome, Tara, to the Keen on Yoga podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so where shall we start? Do you want to just tell me, maybe like pre-yoga, and discuss like just growing up, and you had a story of your childhood and what brought you to yoga finally, and this very interesting background as sommelier, although we won't talk too much about your wine background. Now you're a yoga teacher. Just tell me something about you.
Sure, yeah. Perhaps that wine catapulted me to yoga that we see. Well, I grew up in Toronto. My mother is Canadian. My father is from Hyderabad, from India. And they separated when I was quite young, and then I had a stepfather, and so I saw my father on weekends, and he continued to always tell these beautiful stories, and his name is Gopala Krishna. Yeah, so it's always Krishna for everything in the house. So all the stories of Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, all of these things.
How did he meet your mum, by the way? Did they meet in Canada or in India?
This is great. It was in Toronto. So my father was studying, and both of my parents have masters in anthropology. Right. But my father was actually doing some studies in Yorkville at the time. There's a small street in Toronto called Yorkville. Not small anymore, but at the time it was very underdeveloped. This is in the 60s. Yeah. And if you believe it, he was a guru in Yorkville. Yeah, so he was known as a guru, and he had this big beard and his big wooden beads, and people would come to him and ask him questions. And my grandmother met him and happened upon him one day, and she just absolutely loved him. My grandmother was just completely smitten, and she went home and she told my mother, who was 18, and she went back. My mother said she had a meeting with Gopala, she would say. And he, she asked, okay, well, Gopala, after they had a discussion about their life, she said, what would your advice be for me? And he said, marry me. And she did.
Right.
She did.
What an incredible story. But it didn't last all that long in the end.
It didn't last all that. I think there's probably some cultural, my father had just come from India. He's first generation Indian. And she would always say, and he'd do these studies and, he'd always have people over at the house. And my mother was not used to it. Yeah? Generally in Canada, it's quiet. You may have someone call days in advance to say they're showing up, but there was people all over the house, and aunties and uncles, and everybody. I remember everybody was my aunt and uncle. I couldn't tell. I still can't tell who's who, which is actually blood and not. But I think it was just a bit of a culture shock.
Right.
I think that was the biggest thing. But so my father to this day has never said a bad word about my mother, so it's quite sweet. Yeah.
And he's still in Canada.
He's still in Canada.
Right.
Yeah. Now he's been in Canada longer than India.
Right.
So, yeah. And he never imagined I would ever go back to India. So I think it was a huge shock for him. Like he said to me, I spent my entire life getting you out of India. Why are you going
back? That's what you
back?
do when you're an adult, is go back.
So I think.
Right. But, I think they divorced when you were 2 years old. Did you say 2?
I was about 2.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I think I don't want to kind of dwell on it, but I think you had a difficult. as many of us have, a difficult upbringing with a rather strict stepfather, right? That kind of set a precedent for later life. Let's say.
Yeah, definitely. No, he was. I did have that strict stepfather, and I think growing up was difficult. Yeah, and I guess at that
for
time,
everyone,
for everyone, it's all relative. Yeah, and I think having that childhood, though, I think very strict, and children are to be seen and not heard, and all of these different things. But at the same time, having 3 sisters, where when the parents went around, we were playing and creating, and then the parents would come home, we'd be running to clean everything up quickly.
Right.
So there's this complete dynamic. And then also my father's house on weekends, which was all about, play and having fun and dancing and singing. So there's this big contrast. Yeah. Just a bit. Yeah. This just contrast of just like the super strict and to completely wonderland. You just can't imagine so much play. So it's like somewhere in the middle. Would make sense. So I think I think part of that, and having that confused, not being able to think for myself and make decisions on my own, just being kind of forced what to think. I think this was something that I was struggling with, and couldn't, especially being the youngest of 4 sisters, 4 girls as well, just really trying to figure out what do I like and who am I and what do I actually think without waiting for someone to give me the answer. And so I remember that when I moved to Vancouver, having that moment of like, I have to decorate my house and I don't know what I like, and my sisters aren't here. And so
I would still feel like that now if I had to decorate a house. So I always use different resources to research my guests on the podcast. And I have to credit Harmony here for a great interview, Harmony and Russell, obviously, for a great interview with you recently that I listened to. So if Harmony is listening, which I doubt she is, thank you, Harmony. And on that, you mentioned, as I remember, that you left home at 15. Is that right? Did I get that right? That's crazy. So what happened? I mean, and you left school at the same time as well, for a while, provisionally.
Yeah, just for about a year.
So it must have been really, really adverse circumstances that you weren't happy with. You just had to leave.
Yeah, I think. Well, my childhood was so traumatic, and so it was very abusive. It was quite intense. And when I was 14, then all of that situation had stopped, and then we were sort of trying to figure out how to move on. So. From there, and we actually were. It was quite messy, and we had a huge trial. And anyways, that was in the midst of the trial. And the moment the trial had finished, then my mother changed her her tune, or just how she was, really. And quite honestly, I loved my mom, and we spent time in the kitchen when I was quite young, and just those magical moments. But we never were close beyond the kitchen, so that was our bond. And so I think what happened is everyone was going through a lot of transition that was happening, and we're teenagers. I was teenagers, and my three sisters were all teenagers, because it's 4 girls in 5 years, so quite close together. So
that's crazy. Yeah.
And so I've always been a little bit noble. I stand up for what I believe, and I stand up for what I think is right. And at that moment, I still would think it was right. I just didn't feel supported, and I just felt there was we were just not meeting eye to eye, and
Where did you go, leaving at that age, and how did you support yourself?
I hung out with friends. I went to friends' houses. I was lucky enough to have some very good friends, and so I stayed with a few friends and supporting myself. I would work at like a crystal stand, and I'd do all these. The first job I ever had was was it a crystal? Yeah, I worked at a crystal stand, and then I started. Then I worked at a movie theater and things like that, and then. That movie
hospitality.
Theater. Yeah. Well, movie theater, I was popping popcorn, so it was the start of my roaring career.
Catering, So you completed high school, I suppose, and then so you went back, because you left school for a while and you went back again, I think, and then I mean, I know that the theme of your life is definitely education and being interested in learning and constantly trying to kind of resolve and reconcile, right, and deepen your understanding, and so. But how did you get into the hospitality?
Yes, well, I have a deep curiosity, for life and anything that I'm interested in. So hospitality, like I had mentioned before, my mother was an incredible cook. Actually, so was my stepfather. And of course, my stepmother as well. She cooked Indian, like the family masalas. So everywhere we had this just huge dynamic of beautiful food all around me. So
often in Indian food?
Yes. Yeah. To marry, my father comes with a family masala, right? So we all have to know how to make this dish, or the masala, so that the flavor of the food. So my mother knew it, and then my stepmother would cooks incredibly, and my stepfather actually cooked incredibly well also. So we would eat Korean, Asian. Like my comfort food is either Indian or Chinese, to be honest. Those are the two things. So I just grew up around food, and it was always so life may have been difficult as a child when I was in my house that I was living in full time, not in my father's house, but my mother's house and stepfather. But there was always incredible food. That was just this beautiful comfort of mixed dishes from around the globe. Like you name it, it was there. So it was French, Spanish, incredible. So I had this love. I used to write menus with my mom when we were younger. She'd sit down and we'd have a dinner party, and she'd be like, "Okay, what should we serve as an appetizer?" And we'd start with all of these different, with melon.
Right. So it was in your kind of in a mind to maybe go and do something like that, right?
I think when I was a child, I found so much quiet and silence in cooking, and I think
then you went to restaurants and realized nothing like that in cooking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't stay in the kitchens. I did my chef chef courses, and I did all the training for it. But then I decided not to actually go into the kitchen side of it unless I just had to help out for a minute or two. But I was in the front of the house all those years.
Yeah.
So,
And as a sommelier, you train. I mean, it is an intriguing story. I know that it's kind of polar opposite of the general yoga student to train as a sommelier, but it's an incredible training, because you have to have such an amazing memory for dates and years. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah.
Every single year is a different, a Cote de Rhone from one year is completely different to another, and then the areas, and so and you have a kind of
the macro.
Yeah. And you have a kind of semi-photographic memory, I think I heard you say.
Yes.
Yeah. And I suppose I wanted to get onto the subject just to kind of tell the story.
Go ahead.
I wanted just to tell the story about you you selling your wine cellar from your bed in Mysore, and which is such an amazing kind of little story, isn't it? And then being able to support yourself for 4 years. So I suppose the wines weren't actually obviously in your property, right? They were just online somewhere, right? And you just a click of a button, and you sold your whole wine collection, and that gave you 4 years of living in Mysore.
Yes, yeah.
Of that, so you must have built up a pretty good wine collection.
Yes. Well, I was a sommelier I was in restaurants for 18 years and then 2 years consulting. So always in upper management. And then I was a multi-unit restaurant director, a sommelier. I was a Bordeaux educator. So I loved it. It was beautiful. But my favorite part of it was all about the soil, the earth, the geography. And like you said, year after year after year, everything was it's not static. Everything and so much information. And I think that's why I liked it so much, is because it was just fascinating. And I really loved I'd go through the soil and pick up my hand and be like, wow. And the farmers, the growers, they were always the people I was the most interested in, because just seeing what happens and year to year, and like if it's a hard harvest, how do they make it happen? What are they doing to compensate for it? And very, very amazing.
Just as an aside, did you travel to Europe at all for the wine, or do you just stay in the New World?
No, always. I traveled quite a bit. I was a Bordeaux educator, so for 3 years I'd have to go
France,
back and forth.
Around here?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of time in Saint-Emilion. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, so a lot of macaroons. So.
Croissant, macaroon, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, baguette.
Yeah, baguette. But that wine cellar you were asking me about. So while I was traveling, I traveled a lot. I traveled a lot for work, and I traveled a lot because I was buying and just searching. So I'd travel the world and taste the wines and then bring back what I thought was really cool.
Right, so you were a buyer as well.
Yeah, I was a buyer, and then I was filling personal cellars as well. So the budget was endless, really.
Right.
And so, while I was traveling along the way, I just collect them like my little babies, and I just dust them off and put them in. And I hardly ever drank them. I just every once in a while dust them off and look at them and then put them back. And so by the time I left, I had this beautiful collection of these old crates that I collected over all the almost 20 years.
Where did you store them then? You see, they actually were physical. I was assuming you were buying them online, but they were physical and you had them in your house.
No, they were physical. I had stored them then at the Vancouver Wine Vault. I was before I left.
There's some place to store them.
Yeah,
I don't know about these things. But you never, and again, as another aside, you never got into, I had a history, I'm not proud of it, but from my Irish background, maybe of over drinking. I got heavily into drinking, due to some, let's say, disquiet in my own upbringing, in my own, childhood. As soon as I could, I hit the bottle or the Guinness or, anything I could get my hands on, really. But you didn't really drink, you didn't use alcohol that way. You were able to kind of separate yourself.
I think it's not the best time to taste is 10 o'clock in the morning, so it's never the greatest. You're continually sipping throughout the day. Even if I'm spitting it out, it's still getting into the system. But we drank, but I don't really have an addictive personality.
Right.
It's not that, and it was always an art form. Like I would be the person that if I opened a bottle, I'd get out all the books and I'd read everything I possibly could, take all the notes I could before I touched it. And so I would only smell it, and it could take an hour and a half until I could actually really understand everything there. I could think of textually and theoretically about this wine and the soil before I even touched it. Because I thought if I drank it, then it's over. So
yeah, that wasn't my experience at all.
You're like,
unfortunately, I wish it was. But so how? Going back to the background of trying to reconcile yourself from this upbringing, and then Somalia, and then obviously I just touched upon the fact that you found yourself in Mysore. How did you get into yoga, and then how did that part of the journey go from the yoga to the Mysore part?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Because of that upbringing, I didn't want to carry. Of course, I was carrying some pain and hurt and, residual, because it was such a long period of time of trauma, if you want to say. I'm not one for labeling. I don't really like to use labels, but it's also, it is what it is, right? A long experience of aggression. So I knew that there was something in me that was hurt, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I couldn't figure out what to do. And my understanding was that at that time was I can either become my stepfather or I can become the opposite, and I can heal from it and change and I used to call it break the chain of dysfunction. And so I was very determined, like I am with most of the things that I do. I was determined to break this and see, okay, if I can heal myself, then I can help others heal. And that's been my ongoing motto. And so when I was 18 years old, I went to every kind of therapy that there was, you name it, talk therapy, EMDR. I mean, whatever there was, I tried it.
The EMDR didn't help because that's usually very effective. I mean,
I didn't like it at all, actually.
Didn't
I thought
you?
it was it was a trigger fest for me. Yeah.
Right. I've heard find it very effective. And then, and Bessel van der Kolk I interviewed here as well. He I think he loves it. He raves about it.
Yeah. I think each person is individual, and I'm not sure if when I tried it, I was ready for it, because for me, that moment, it brought me right back into the moment where I'm also my senses are heightened, as with the sommelier, and being able to do those things. So I see it and I taste it. I'm a visual listener, so it's too much. And so for me to process in that way was just like, whoa, slow down.
Too overwhelming.
Too overwhelming.
How did you know there was something wrong? I mean, what were the if it's not too personal?
No, it's
because you seem so sorted and so calm and clear. How did you feel at that time that you knew something was wrong? I mean, for me, for example, it was clear I was suffering a lot of panic and anxiety, and the only thing that would calm me down was to have a drink. As soon as I had a drink, I felt relaxed. So, it was a recipe disaster, really.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think, there is just these, when I was younger, I was bizarre. Like when I was 16, I'd find myself scrubbing the bathroom at 2 a.m. This isn't normal. Like I had some strange, OCD. I don't know if you want to, whatever. I just had these strange things I was doing. And I'm like, why am I? And I was crying, like scrubbing the floors with a toothbrush and just crying. And so there was pain within. So I would cry a lot. There's a lot of release and a lot of sadness. And I just was like, it's heaviness. And it just sat there. And I'm like, I can feel the heaviness. And, I know it's not part of me. It's not me. And it was actually just brought in by someone else. And so I have to be cognizant of, okay, whatever this is, I need to be able to release it, and not just to I have to get this out. It's just look at it, see how it is, process it, or be okay with whatever is residual. Instead of, just it has to go, which is what I was doing when I was younger and going through all those different talk therapies and all those things. I'm not sure if how much it did, because, now I think about it, and maybe it did. I shouldn't say that, because each step paves the way for the next step. So perhaps those were great moments to be able to allow me to get to the next level of even trying EMDR, or even trying, somatic healing and all the different movements. So I did these I was also in management. I started managing when I was 18. And so at the same time, I started reading all of these psychology books. So I was self-studying psychology as well. And that was helping me to understand. And it's like any kind of psychology, right? You start to understand it, and then you can apply it to what's happening within life. But there has to be some sort of a aha moment, or like an experiential moment of, oh, okay, here's what it means. Or it's just this pie in the sky and it doesn't link to anything. So I think I was trying to figure out how to link it into releasing within my body. And I didn't, because just talking about it, I don't think sometimes it doesn't help. I think it all connection. Yeah.
And you got into yoga through feeling that there was something that was deeper than you could talk it out. I mean, that was my experience anyway, that, kind of like, okay, I've done all the talking and everything kind of remains like, I see what's there. Like I can kind of, I can clearly talk a good game here. Like I can tell you what's wrong, but nothing is changing, and there's something that feels like it's coiled somewhere in the body that needs to be, seen to, or, was that your experience of coming to yoga?
Yeah, I went to yoga because I was just working so much. As you know, the restaurant business can be really trying. And God, I was probably working 80 to 100 hours a week, and I was tired, and I had a big staff, and it was pretty much everything was on me, usually all the responsibility. So I just needed to relax. I thought, okay, I'll go to this class, and I was living in Whistler, and very sweet girl. She taught us a little yin practice or something like that, and I just felt so good. I was in heaven. I laid down in shavasana. I was like, this is incredible, and I just kept going, and then. Just from that, again, my curiosity got piqued, and I just kept going, continued. And for the first 5 years, I was traveling a lot with work. So I would just go to whatever class that I enjoyed, which eventually I realized was all based on ashtanga. Yeah, so I would go to all those different classes.
It comes back there at the end.
Yeah. It all went back there. And then when I found that, then I was like, and I was living in Sonoma, and then I found Johnny Smith. And then his buddy Tim Miller. Yes, in Sebastopol.
Right, okay, I didn't know he was up there. Yeah. So for some reason I thought he was in California.
Yeah, that's California. Yeah.
So you moved from Whistler.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was getting confused in the life story right now. So
sorry. Yeah.
Right. It was all happening too quickly. Then you were in Sonoma, and then you practiced with him.
Yeah, so from Whistler, I went back to Vancouver, and then eventually I went
down the coast.
Just kept going warmer and warmer and warmer. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, right. And then at a certain point, you decided to go to Mysore, but you didn't go originally to any of the Jois family, did you? You went somewhere else and organised the whole program for another yoga studio in Mysore, I think.
Yes, I had been practicing for a while, and I went to some teacher training, right? And when I got it was okay. It's okay. They did the best that they knew, and it was just that chef in me and the organization. I was like, do you want some help? I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, what should we do? And I'm like, I'm just going to rewrite your menu here and take out some of the dosas. And
it's just so funny because Teresa, my wife, would have done, it's just so reminiscent of something that she would do as well. And also the scheduling is not working. You need to reschedule the It's just that makes me laugh.
They were asking. I was just like, it was. Yeah, I think it's just because most people were beginners, and I had already been practicing, and so I already knew the sequences, and everyone was still just beginning, and so I was a bit restless. It was okay. And they were happy. I mean, it was nice. We enjoyed ourselves.
And you stayed there then, or you came back and you went back again? How did that transpire?
I did the whole training with them. I stayed, and we became friends, and I mainly went to a lot of the temples, and I was doing panchakarmas and studying Ayurveda and doing things like that. So I stayed for the month, and then I went back, and then Johnny Smith was like, "You learned this in Mysore?" I was like, "Oh," because I had the transition wrong from I'm completely blanking. We had
But why didn't Johnny tell you in the first place? You probably want to go to someone of the Jois family.
I actually wasn't practicing with him yet until I came back.
Okay, right, okay. And then he was like, well, you said you went to Mysore and then you were doing something.
Exactly. I was like, And then he did the beautiful, sweet, old-fashioned thing the next year, and he brought my and one of our friends Susan's applications with him to Mysore to try to old hand submit them the old way, and it didn't go over well.
Oh, really?
Get in, yeah.
So very interesting. You're right. You're trying to take. I'd never heard of that before. Right. Yeah. So you just applied online like everyone else, and then in the end got in. And you. Is that right?
Yes. Well, I had already met Sharath a few times in California, so I practiced with him San Francisco and practiced with him in Los Angeles. And then, so I applied to practice with Saraswati my first time in Mysore. Well, first time at the KPJ in Mysore.
Why was that? Just due to being the summer, or was it a particular reason?
Went to
Saraswati.
It was summer. Yeah, it was summer. And then it was also so I hadn't got in the wintertime, and then I had to rearrange my entire schedule again. And then I said, I'm just going to go. And I had a friend that had just been there with Saraswati, and she absolutely loved her. And she said, you know what, T, just go, you'll enjoy it. And I went, and, truthfully, Sharath was still there anyways. And he was, that's kind of, they were still both in the shala. He would come and talk to me all the time. And I was trying to do my citizenship, and he'd always ask me every day, how's it going? How's the OCI? And, he was very helpful. And, it's nice to see them together in the shala. I liked that quite a bit. And at the end of that season, that I had said to Saraswati, I thought, oh no, I have to have this conversation, because I'd been with her for now 4 months or something like this, practicing.
You stayed there for 4 months. And at what point did you sell your wine center and just think, I'm going to change my life here?
Oh, that was a little bit later. So that was another, So that was probably after about a year. Of being there. And so I had just said, I went into Saraswati and I said, Mataji, because I had already planned to practice with Sharath, and I had already talked to him, and he was expecting me, and, had the conversation. How many times have you come? And all these things. And I thought, well, Mataji, I know you're supposed to have one teacher, and I've been practicing with you, and you're not supposed to switch in between the teachers. And I said, what should I do, Mataji? Because I'm supposed to practice with Sharath. And she looked at me, and she's like, comes in really close, and she's like, you're right, Tara. Very good. You're my student. You stay with me. Done.
That's a clear answer. Yeah, if you want an answer.
Very clear.
Yeah. But you became
seriously.
Yeah, and you became very close with Saraswati, right? And from my understanding, of listening to the Harmonies podcast, you really, how is that? Do you think because of your background as an Indian, or why? How did that transpire? Because in the end, I was kind of confused myself almost, because having spent a lot of time in Mysore, everyone knows that it's everyone's trying to, or many people, not everyone, trying to kind of get closer to the family, right? And it sounds like your experience of almost kind of being in and out of the house all the time. It's like many people would give their two back teeth for, the closeness you had to the family.
So beautiful. No, I think it was just so natural. We just had a nice understanding, and just something. For the first 2 years, it was just this magical. Like, it really, I think back of it like that, because it really felt like there was other people around, of course, but just I would always sit next to her throughout the time, anytime it was quiet, and she would tell me all kinds of stories, like just giggling. We would giggle, we laughed, we cried, I cried, she cried. Like, we just shared everything. And she would even say that. She'd look at me and she's like, I don't know why I'm telling you. And I said, it's okay, Mataji, it's safe. Like, I won't do anything with that information. But she taught me everything, like all the truth.
It's a shame, because I would love to hear.
Like all the different things. Like after class, she's like, hurry up, wash your feet. Like, so all of the different things. It was just very, very sweet in every single festival. And she would talk to me, tell me what to do, and check what I've done. But then she also checked on my life socially, like, who am I spending time with? What am I doing? Yeah, she really was asking. So I didn't feel like, when I think about, how I was practicing, she really took a huge interest in my life and every part of it, and was checking that I was actually a good teacher. She would always, who did you do? What did I eat? Like, everything she wanted to know.
Right, so you didn't have a regular experience of Mysore,
I didn't have.
Because we know the general yoga students are kind of eating green leaf or the Southern Star, and going out, on a Friday night for pizza and drinks, and God knows what else. And so your life in Mysore was a very different experience, right?
Very, very different. Right. Mm-hmm. It was quite beautiful, and very peaceful, and all the I even went to temples with her quite often, and we had a very nice time together. And
Was she allowed you to socialize, or only with certain people?
If she didn't approve, she just she wouldn't say it would just more like this. So I'd know already. So I wasn't actually crazy social anyways. And she'd already knows. Half of the time she knew what I was doing before I even told her. So even if I didn't tell her something, she knew. Yeah, it's just like that. That's kind of the Indian way of life anyways. Most people know everything about everybody before it's happening or while it's happening. So how she knows. But mainly, she was...
Were you staying all that time, or did you go back and forth?
I stayed, in the off season, like the shala would close for about 1 month, 2 months or something in between. Then I'd usually travel. In the beginning I did, in the end I didn't really travel very much, maybe just within India, because at that time when we were practicing with T.K.V and other teachers as well. So we'd do that. But no, I would go back to California mainly, or Canada, just to see friends and family.
Right.
Yeah.
And you finished the work. You weren't working anymore. You're just living off your wine cellar.
Living off my wine cellar at that point, yes. From my bed in Manju's old room in Mysore, I clicked send on my cellar. Yeah. Which was very good that I saved that, because it afforded me 4 years of living in India.
That's a brilliant story. And how was Saraswati as a teacher?
I think she was, again, my experience is different, and I can only speak from my experience, of course. And, for me, she was very sweet and very tough.
I think most people would say the same. My small experience of when she used to work, with Saraswathi Jois, it used to be Saraswathi Jois on the stage, and then obviously Sharath and Saraswathiji on the like going around the room, and so I had quite a few adjustments from Saraswati. I'd say firm and clear. Yeah. And she was sweet. I mean, I tell you what, she loved to talk. I said it on another podcast, I think. My experience of having coffee when I was invited one time to go up and meet Saraswathi Jois, and Sharath kind of went off to the side, and he was speaking to the workmen that were doing something on the house. He was kind of not interested. But Saraswathi Jois was at that point rather old, and he was just wandering here and there, really. So he wasn't really. Yeah. I couldn't really talk to him, so we were kind of stuck there. And Saraswati happened to walk in, so it was like, oh God, it's lucky. I think there was a couple of aunties or someone, there was a couple of other people around. Saraswati, hi. And she sat there for like 40 minutes, because when she found out I was interested in cooking, then she's explaining all these, all the recipes and stuff. Because wherever we travel, I always do all the cooking for Guruji, and you do this, and she's very, very, very sweet, which is very different to my experience of her in the shala, I have to say, where she was a bit stern and a bit more firm. Yeah,
she has both sides, and of course. I think at some points she was tougher on me than most. Yeah. And I think it was, I know why, because she knew I was capable, and she knew not that everyone else wasn't capable. Of course they all are too, but I think it was just because I was there all the time. And when she said stay with me.
You were assisting. Yeah. Because I think that happens differently with Saraswati, right? Because when we were assisting with Sharath, we'd kind of only have to do it once. And it was only like a small, a small window, really. It was quite easy. And people that were, goodies, they would always go and ask again, they would always do it again. I didn't have to say. Once was enough for me, because I was working the rest of the year doing that work, so it's kind of happy not to do too much in the shala. But it was a small window. I remember like an hour and a half or 2 hours or something, and it was tough because Sharath was, he would get involved, and there was a story that I think you told of Saraswati, so not like that, and then you do it again, and it's unclear what you did wrong, and then it's like, no, not like that, and you think you did that anyway. You kind of think that's kind of what I did, not like that, and you had the kind of a couple of those stories with Saraswati, but my point was you were practicing and assisting all this time during a number of years, right? So you must have really had an incredible learning experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, not only with Saraswati, but also just learning the human body. I mean, to be able to see that many bodies, literally thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies, I learned so much. I learned so much about anatomy. I learned so much about psychology, the human mind, just watching people in this situation and watching people, just the different dynamics, right? Just watching how people respond to being in this room. And I mean, just fascinating, absolutely positively fascinating. In the motions and the capabilities and the impossibilities of the body and the possibilities. And then once I met my husband and then we opened the clinic, then it was even more so just about, just the human function and the human body. And
he's an osteopath, right? Rob's an osteopath?
A chiropractor, close.
Chiropractor, right. Similar. A
chiropractor.
A bit more physical, the chiropractor, a bit more cranking.
Yeah, and he's a Gonstead chiropractor, so it's not so much cranky.
Yeah, rocking around. But I have had a chiropractic treatments that were, definitely quite intense, let's say. And so he opened the clinic in Mysore, and then you joined him, and then you were working together in that capacity.
Yes, well,
or you would kind of refer your students from the shala to him. So there's a kind of perfect companion.
It was somewhat like that, yes, because I helped organize and just put a team together because we had Rob was doing the chiropractic, and then we had Dr. Padmini, so she was doing Ayurveda. She's just phenomenal. And then we had 2 massage therapists. And so the combination of everything, and I would teach yoga as a therapy, and the combination worked quite well. And a lot of people were struggling and suffering. I mean, that was the interesting thing, is that Rob has seen hundreds and hundreds of yogis, or practitioners, right? And their bodies, and understand the body types. And it's just very, very interesting. And then teaching, I met him at a scoliosis workshop. And for me, that was fascinating. So then, of course, when everyone did Paschimottanasana, then I was like, I'm just looking at everyone's back. Went through this moment of, okay, so how is it? So I think for me, it was, meeting Rob and being in that space. It went from, it's always been philosophy, chanting, asana, but then this entire other side of it starts to come into play, because I watched a lot of people being able to do things, but I also watched a lot of people falling apart. Yeah, I saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of injuries. I saw a lot of people pushing themselves way too hard. Yeah. When I know that they've just been at the clinic and I can't say anything, and yet they come back in.
Yeah, and they do the same thing again. Yeah, what are we having a conversation? Something like, are we just talking about that?
I'm just like, and I can't say anything because I'm like,
well, that's psychology then, isn't it? That's a different subject. But does the anatomy inform your teaching now, and how do you use yoga as therapy as well?
It does, definitely. I mean, I think anatomy is
because you're teaching mainly one-to-ones, aren't you? Since the pandemic, you've been teaching one-to-ones online more, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I started teaching a lot of chanting. My students started asking that, so that was one thing. And then the one-to-one started because I was also studying yoga therapy. So I think it's such a completely different thing. So I'll back up for a second and say, I started studying. So after I was in the shala for such a long time and seeing all these different things. So everything has come from the mind, right? You wouldn't be pushing yourself so hard in the mat if something wasn't going on in the mind that's saying, hey, I need to push. I need to, what is that? Like, is it, is it craving? Is it aversion? Is it, greed, or whatever it is, right? We don't know what's going on. One of the antarayas or something's working. So I think at that point, I just was looking around and I'm like, can I actually help any of these people? Because I see so many people in pain. And there's so many people I picked up off the bathroom floor crying, so many people that are arguing in the office, everything. I was in it all. I picked them up. I'm like, okay, you can't talk to Saraswati like that. I'm like, come on, let's go for a little walk. She's like, you tell them, Tara. I'm like, okay, Ma, I'll tell them. And so I think, and it's not, it's just an emotional, right? It just becomes everything gets so heightened when you're in this space all the time. And I think that's just what happens for people. It's just this, whichever opening happens. But I started thinking, if someone comes and they do have serious back pain, or they do have, severe knee pain, or hormonal imbalances, can I help them? Can I really, really help them? And, I knew that answer was no. I couldn't. I could say,
that just kind of teaching them the primary series wouldn't be enough.
Yeah. Well, when most women were losing their periods, and still are, it's just like that's telling.
You see that as quite endemic, do you?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of women are losing their periods when they're practicing.
Right.
And
why is that?
It's perhaps it could be a multitude of things, right? Incorrect breathing would be probably number one. And then also diet. If the body's not strong enough and weak, and the diet's not fatty enough and nutritious enough, and then all of a sudden it's just being dehydrated completely, and also bandhas, incorrect use of bandhas. And so the combination of it all can, really alter the cycle. And it's just, for me, I don't even talk about bandhas for years. It's just like, don't worry, just leave that alone. Just breathe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've already thought of it because people only refer things to what they know already. And I mean, the idea of the bandha is, it's a lot subtler than kind of gym work, which is just kind of like doing a sit up, So, I mean, I'd say, like, I admit myself that I think for the first 10 years, for me, bandhas was squeezing my abs as hard as I could. And that, it doesn't really do much apart from, make you a potential kind of hernia candidate, really.
Yeah. So. Well, the old mistranslation of the tight your anus doesn't help either. Of that.
Yeah, probably right.
Everyone's like, like, not that tight. It's just like a very subtle lift. So I think a lot of it just gets confused and mistranslated. And so I've just seen so many different health issues. And so I wanted to go further. So then I started studying yoga as a therapy. So yoga therapy, traditional yoga therapy in Chennai in the lineage of Krishnamacharya. And so I just finished that. So if all goes well, within 12 days, I very well may be a yoga therapist. So...
Excellent. Yeah, and you also studied Ayurveda as well, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, traditional yoga therapy and Ayurveda go hand in hand.
They go together, right? So it's part of it, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Padmini, who I was talking about, Dr. Padmini from Mysore, her mother is a yoga therapist, and she was a student of Krishnamacharya directly. She was my first teacher in yoga therapy. So it's all linked. If you look at the Mohans, their son is a Ayurveda doctor as well. So,
why does Ayurveda go hand in hand with yoga?
It's just the sister science, right? It's like, how do we, the dinacharya, like, how are we keeping ourselves healthy? Because it's not just one thing. Yeah. It's like, how are we, if I eat perfectly, but then I don't do any exercise, yes, it's not going to work. Or if I really, really just put all my effort into exercise and then I eat pizza all day long, then that's not going to do it. So it's this concept of just from morning to night.
The focus on the individual, right? With Ayurveda, that they treat the individual as, as a different, each individual as a different constitution, right? As having a different dosha interrelated with external circumstances, which is particular also to them, right? So it kind of roots the whole of yoga into an individualized therapy rather than what it's kind of become for a lot of us, which is a generalized prescription, just like a Western medicine, right? You take practice, which means like just do the primary series. Everyone does it the same. You ought to do it the same even, and any understanding of Ayurveda, I believe, would be suggestive that really yoga is to be used individually for that person, as diet varies from person to person depending on their type and right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, especially, I mean, same as yoga as yoga as a therapy is the exact same way. Yeah. You just treat the individual, treat the person in front of you for how they are. Yeah. And it's you're never labeling a condition. It's the person in front of you, not this condition. And because everyone will manifest that same condition differently. And so I love studies. So perfect example, my research studies were on post-traumatic stress. Yeah. And, I had 9 students all together, and each one of them had a very different response to the same thing that happened. Yeah. From psoriasis to like anxiety so deep that you can't leave the room, just like crippling. And so it's just fascinating, and eating disorders, like all of these different responses to the same situation, because we're so individual. We can't teach in blanket teach. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's why I love Mysore style classes, because, this way you can alter it, right, for the person. But that is what yoga therapy is like Vini yoga is all completely looking at the person and what's happening. And it's mainly, what's happening in the mind, because what's happening in the mind is going to manifest in the body. So.
Presuming you don't teach ashtanga yoga to post-traumatic stress, or do you? How, I suppose I'd like you to maybe give an example of how you use yoga as a therapy. It's banded around a lot, like yoga therapy. A lot of teachers say yoga therapy, and then they end up just teaching exactly the same, like...
I think so if someone comes in for a session on yoga therapy, it starts mainly, I have a complete pre-questionnaire, and I'll ask them everything about, from diet to lifestyle to past injuries, everything. So that this way, when they come in and I do a full scan, double checking that if one shoulder is raised or if the Achilles is folding in or out. And a lot of things are happening in the body and they won't realize. So I have hip pain, but hey, my foot is turned out and they may not notice it. So we do a full scan. So, and then on top of that, anything else, also parents, asking what's happening with the parents, any of their history. And of course, there's much more to it, but that's a very basic overview. So we ask them that. And then I meet with them and talk to them, have a little bit of a discussion, and then check some movements, check their breath. The breath is the most important thing in yoga therapy. And to understand a person's breathing is to understand everything. Yeah. And most people don't breathe correctly. It should be taught in school, I believe. It's the majority of people are not breathing.
How do you teach them to breathe better?
It depends on that person. There's so many different techniques. Yeah. So if someone has anxiety or they have upper chest breathing, I'm going to probably get them to bring their hands to their belly and teach them to do some lower belly breathing into their hands, because if this is coming up, we want to get out of that. And actually, you see that a lot in ashtanga. You notice a lot of people are upper chest breathing, and then there's... And so this is the same thing. So it's how do we bring the air further down and just to come into more of the parasympathetic for that person, right? How can I work with calming the mind, and what else is happening within that person? And so is there acidity? Is there, Ayurveda will always work with Agni. So you're going to work with your digestion. If the digestion is not strong, then that's the very first thing. So we fix the digestion. If the digestion is weak, everything else will be weak. So we start with that. So we start with digestion, you start with everything else. Yeah, and then I don't change to it depending on the person, right? So each of them are individual. I have some people that I only work with diet, and I have some people that, will only want to do asana and not talk about their diet. That's okay, but eventually they will. After 1 year, I've just, one girl is just like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm like, no problem. But a year later, now we're working on that. And
how do you, for many people that have digestive problems, it just occurs to me, have you got any very basic recommendations for kind of raising the digestive fire, the agni, strengthening the digestion?
Yeah, I think so. Well, a lot of people do. And again, it's so individual. But, if somebody has digestive problems, I would definitely say stay away from raw foods. They're harder to digest. Right. Also drink and cold. Yeah. Not like ice cold, anything like that. It's also going to slow down digestion. So you want to drink warm things, have warm soupy things, and not hard, anything that's hard to digest. Yeah. And again, depending on your constitution. So generally, if you're going to have a lot of lentils and legumes and things, they're heavy, they're hard to digest. And so if you have really bad digestion, then in Ayurveda, they'll always say have kanji, which is like this very watery rice soup. Yeah,
but as a vegetarian, where are you getting your protein if you're not using the beans and the legumes?
Nuts. I have a lot of nuts. I have a lot of nuts and seeds.
Nuts, right? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of greens, and I get huge amounts of greens. Nut butters, things like that. So avocados. I have a lot of good fats, and so I incorporate that. I do have ghee because you can't study Ayurveda and not have ghee. I tried not to.
That ghee, yeah.
I got in trouble for it. I was like,
And you eat rice and grains?
I do. I have red rice because it's tridosha, so I prefer. Yeah, and so for me, like they'll always say, whatever the grain is that gives you energy, and for me, mine's quinoa. If I eat quinoa, I'm like fired up. I feel great. And so for me, I can have quinoa, and then we have quinoa pasta. And so we change it up that way because I love to cook. I still have to keep it exciting in the kitchen. So there's so many different things that we can make, and it's just
obviously you're in Sicily now, but you don't eat gluten, so you're not taking up the various offerings of the Italian kitchen, right? The pizzas and the pastas. But have you what dishes do you like there? Have you come across things that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, we don't eat out all that much, but I'm getting better. I used to be incredibly traditional, where we just, because Saraswati was like, you don't eat outside, you don't talk. There's all these different rules, and my family is some parts of my family. So I went through this whole phase where I wore white and made my ghee and did puja every day. I still do the pujas. I just don't wear white anymore all the time. So, yeah, there's a few. I mean, mainly we'll just have like grilled vegetables, or they'll make a dish for us. They'll make a risotto. Once in a while, we'll have a white rice or something like that.
Okay, yeah. So you do allow yourself to make exceptions now and again.
Of course, yeah. Because I mean,
do you still have a
even
glass
in
of wine?
Ayurveda, once in a while.
Once
in a while, yeah.
Do you get a really good one when you have one? Do you go, make sure it's like not the house wine, like kind of Chianti 1966?
It depends. Yeah, well,
right.
Yeah, that would be nice. And like, it depends, right? If I'm the only one going to have a glass of wine, no, because it's just going to sit there. So it's once in a while. I think I've always saw wine as an art form, and so I've looked at it like that, and that's why I always have these textbooks, and I kept it as a study of art, and that's how I've always thought of it. So, I think of it like this.
I've got to ask you though, just a silly question. What's the largest amount you've paid for a bottle of wine?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I used to get a lot of gifts from reps and customers and things because I worked in high-end restaurants. So hence that cellar being, I think, I don't know how much I paid.
Lasted you well.
It lasted me well. I think the most expensive bottle in that collection was probably, I guess by the time we sold it was probably worth $1,600 or $2,000.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah.
And
you wouldn't want to drink that all at once. Yeah.
No, then there was like 600 and like
I could never even open those kind of bottles. I could never do it,
Yeah, life was very different. It was just like, it's strange, Neverland. Like I don't even feel like that was my life because it was so extreme, and it was just this, I'd fly around the world, and I was practicing yoga to manage the stress from this job. And then it's just somehow, it just completely flipped. And now I sit on the floor barefoot most of the time, discussing yoga and helping people get back into health.
How long has that been? How long have you been in this change of life, let's say?
10 years.
10 years, yeah.
Yeah.
And you had the clinic for a number of years, and then in the last 2 years, if we just kind of go to the more modern, the current, you're in Sicily, as I mentioned, and after an aborted attempt at going to Australia for Rob's job, I believe, and you came to the UK and decided that you probably go somewhere nicer, warmer, sunnier at least.
Exactly. Yeah. So actually, I left Vancouver with the 2010 Olympics. Right after that. So that means it's almost 12 years. Time is flying. And then, so we lived in Mysore. I was in Mysore for 5 years. And then, Rob got a great job opportunity, and we hummed and hawed. We never planned on leaving Mysore, and I wasn't planning on leaving Saraswati. Just the whole thing wasn't planned upon. And all my other teachers, my philosophy teachers there, and my Carnatic music teachers there, everybody's there. And Rob's teachers in Pune, the OP Tiwariji. And so, we ended up going over to the UK to take this job opportunity while we paused in the UK while we were going to Australia. And then there was a bump in paperwork. And then we had to start again. And that process would take 4 months. And so during that 4 months, COVID happened.
That's so strange, isn't it, how things happen? And then COVID happens, and then you're stuck in the UK, and you can't get there, and then and then the end. Are you gonna go back to? When are you going to go back to see Saraswati? By the way, can you get back to India?
I can. I mean, could have always went because I have citizenship.
Right.
I just don't feel it's safe. I don't. I have a lot of friends, and all my teachers are still there, and it still doesn't feel safe enough to travel. It's not quite over what's happening. This thing.
Okay.
So,
So staying put for now in Sicily.
Staying put, maybe in June. I think I'm contemplating June. Yeah, June, July is when we're thinking about it. So we want to go see all the teachers. Yeah, see Saraswati and then see Tiwariji. Yeah. And so.
Do you think you'll stay there? Do you see yourself staying in Italy for the longer term?
Yes. Yeah. We went back and forth with this idea many times, and we have a new rescue pup, Mia. So we have Chintu from India, and now we have Mia. So we have two. So it makes it harder.
Family there.
Yeah. It makes it much harder to transport the family. So if we went back to India, it's hard on the dogs too. That journey is quite tough. So I think we're here. We've decided that we'll be here. We'll go to India continually. We'll still go twice a year like we used to when everything resettles. We're close to Rob's family, and we'll open a shala. So I'm looking for a space.
Oh, you go to, right, okay. Whereabouts are you in Italy, by the way?
It's time. We're in Sicily.
Yeah, and whereabouts in Sicily?
So in like Sant'Alfio Giare. So it's Catania, but we're closer in the farm country because we have a little small piece of land, and we've just been planting.
Yeah. Just so people get an idea, so when you find a place, they know where you are.
Yes.
And come straight down and bring a bottle of wine or something.
Hopefully come to practice. Yeah. Part of my life is like,
mucking around.
Prefer a little bit more in the earth and pranayama. Yeah. Some chanting.
Just to finish on our interview, I mean, it actually kind of goes hand in hand. Well, give me one inspiration and one guilty pleasure. And we won't talk about the wine anymore.
One inspiration. No, it's okay. One inspiration.
You've got so many inspirations, I know.
So many. I think, one of a really beautiful inspiration. Wow, there are so many. I have to say, I'd have to say Lakshmi Ranganathan, my first yoga therapy teacher. And of course, first Saraswati, of course, she's an inspiration. But I think on this, the reason that I love, actually, you know what? There's a similarity between the two of them, between Saraswati and Lakshmi, is that this dedication to their teacher. So when you hear Saraswati talk about her father, it's just like all this, complete dedication to the teachings. And
well, also she learned of Krishnamacharya, didn't she? I mean, people don't know that Saraswati was directly from Krishnamacharya.
She studied with him twice.
Yeah.
She showed me the
certificate.
The certificates. So she went twice with him, and she's like, yes, and she's beautiful because she's quite groundbreaking in what she's done and being the first woman to teach women. And I find that incredibly fascinating. And I love Lakshmiji, I think, for her motivation. And I mean, to be the first female teacher also at KYM, and to, just continue these teachings. She's a cheerleader for women and women's health. And she's taught me so much about that as well. And I think this whole concept of, talking about women and women's health instead of just, usually it's to the wayside. It's like, oh, don't worry about it. Everybody's okay. And it's just, there's so much more to it. And, I think that just this continual learning, having this beginner's mind. And I think that's what I like, because both of them will have a beginner's mind. Saraswati, I remember I was learning a new song, and she said, what am I learning? And I told her, it's a song, Adishesha. And she said, sing. And so I started just singing. And she says, now you teach me. I said, Mataji, I don't want to teach you a song. And we did. We learned it together, and we sang it every day.
Nice.
And so I think that the beautiful childlike nature and that beginner's mind that all of my teachers, actually, I have to say Vigneshwar holds the same. All of my teachers carry this genuine nature and sweetness about them. That's probably what's most inspirational.
It's lovely.
So I couldn't say just one, because I can see all of them, even Tiwariji. Tiwariji calls me Taraji, and I'm like, please don't call me G.
All right. Now, the other question I'm most intrigued about, because you seem very upright, rather straight-laced maybe. What's your guilty pleasure? You must have an Achilles heel somewhere.
Guilty pleasure? My cuddling with my dogs? Yeah.
Oh, come on.
This is a guilty pleasure. What do I love? Let's see. My husband made gluten-free lasagna the other day. Let's see. I don't know. I don't have like.
No, it's all right. It's all right. We're back it around. Lovely. All right. Well, next time maybe. For the next time, fine. We'll find a guilty pleasure. But it's been really wonderful to chat to you, Tara, and you're actually very inspiring to me. So thank you for your time. And I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Nice to be with you and talk to you.